Hello, welcome to another weekly update. Welcome to the first weekly update of 2022. Very happy new year to everyone. So last time we did a bit of a roundup of the best things I thought happened in 2021 and what we're looking forward to for 2022. And I think when I talked about that, I did say briefly, I kind of talked briefly about the fact that maybe it all gets disrupted and changes anyway. I actually didn't think it was going to happen quite so quickly. One of the things we're going to talk about today is a super disruptive announcement that came out kind of quietly, but I think will really change lots and lots of things going into this year for 2022. And I think it's going to end up being a really big part of 2022. That's what I'm going to spend the majority of time talking about. And then there's also a few other things as well we can talk about. Just looking across what other people have been blogging about and some different announcements. There isn't, lots of news as you might expect, but it's a good opportunity to just look at some different things. Okay, so what's this big thing that is going to change 2022? So a couple of weeks ago, there was an announcement that I talked about around the general availability of Teams Interop for Teams meetings in Azure Communication Services. So that's been well covered. Azure Communication Services client, what does that mean? It means you can build something in a web page or iOS or Android, a client of your own that you can brand, you can white label, and you can bring that client into a Microsoft Teams meeting. So that's by itself is very exciting. I've already talked through that. This is slightly different that I missed in the initial blog post. And it was only when I was combing through documentation looking for something else that I realized that at the same time, there was a new feature that went into public preview here that does something different. And what it does is it allows Azure Communication Services to use the Microsoft Teams identity as a sign-in process and then make and receive calls as that Microsoft Teams identity. So what does that mean? Let's take through in steps. It means that you can build something using Azure Communication Services pieces, so the bits that you put on web pages that you can brand yourself, those UI components. However, you don't need to make an ACS identity that is separate from your Teams identity. You can use your Microsoft Teams identity. Literally, you can log in as that Teams user, then make and receive calls to other Teams people using this web page experience. So suddenly, you are embedding Microsoft Teams functionality in the browser. And that is huge because that is something that has always been wanted, has always been asked for as long as I can remember, Link days, Skype for Business days. It's always been incredibly hard to take the client functionality and embed it inside of a browser. We got super close with the Web SDK. But there were a load of weird restrictions around needing ORTC, using the old Edge, and it never really took off for that reason. This is completely different. This is WebRTC based. This is completely don't need a plugin, don't need a download, works in the browser natively. Means that organizations can completely white label their experience and have users using their Teams identities where it makes sense, as well as being able to do all the standard stuff with Azure Communication Services, which bring your own identity. So super, super exciting. I think this actually is going to be a really big deal for 2022. I think we're going to see lots of partners bring forward applications that are meant for Teams users or people with Teams identity. So people inside your organization, so agents or customer service reps or salespeople or whatever else it is, and they need to make and receive Teams calls, providing those people with bringing Teams functionality to those other applications, so third-party applications. We see part of this in Dynamics today. So the functionality that you see in Dynamics 365 to allow you to make calls from inside Dynamics, I think that's using that same functionality, that same technology. Things to know about this. So this is voice and video, it's not chat. So the point here, the big announcement here is around voice and video, and that's the really hard bit. That's the bit that's never really been possible. It is actually possible to do it today with chat. You could do it using Microsoft Graph API endpoints. There's actually no reason why you couldn't do all of that stuff today. You can identify yourself in Graph as an AD or a Teams user, and you can send and receive chats using existing Graph API calls. So this is more for the voice and video, and that's where it's really exciting. Other thing, this is not free, so we should talk about pricing a little bit. So this is going to cost you if you do this, even though you're already paying for Teams licenses. If you are taking your existing Teams user and your Teams experience and you are embedding it in a web page that somebody is going to identify, they're going to use, and they're going to use their Teams identity as to auth, and then make and receive calls that way, you are going to pay something for that. So what does that look like? So this is a blog post I did, you can go and read, but I've taken the diagram from the Microsoft documentation. I've overlaid with really bad graphics some $signs, because that helps me understand a little bit easier where you get paid and where you don't get paid. And so we can kind of see up here, you've got on the left hand side here, you've got Teams users using their Teams identity. And so you've got, let's see, top left hand side, is the Teams users using the Teams client, and using the Teams experience, completely normal, like no special things. This is how it works exactly today. Underneath that, you've got a Teams user, so identifying using Microsoft Teams, but they're doing it using Azure Communication Services. So they're doing it in a web page somewhere. Now you're going to pay something for that. What you're going to pay is going to be consumption based, so it's going to be per minute charging. It's almost like thinking about it like this, right? You're using Teams and you're using Teams as your identity, but you're going through ACS. You're kind of traversing through ACS to make that happen. So you need to pay ACS along the way. It's like a gatekeeper, right? You pay the gatekeeper as you go. So you need to kind of pay ACS for the privilege of going through their service to get back to your Teams meeting or your Teams experience. And then on the right-hand side of your Teams meeting, you've got the stuff that went GA on the bottom right-hand side, which is being able to use ACS to get into a Teams meeting. And then on the top right, you've got what you've always had, which is being able to use the Teams client, the web-based Teams client, to join meetings as well. So lots of different options now. I think this is really interesting. What's interesting is that it's not just Teams meetings at this point. You can make and receive calls, like one-to-one calls as well in this preview. So, loads of really interesting stuff going on. Like I say, I think this is going to be really big this year. This is definitely something to watch out for. Yeah, we already see. So I know there may be others. So apologies if there are. I know Landis. They have like a product. I think it's called Attendant Pro. Sorry if I've got the name wrong. But they use this. That they've been waiting for this to come out. Now that it's in preview, they can bring their code into preview. So super exciting for them. So congrats to them for being one of the first to kind of implement this in the real world. I think it's very exciting. I think it'll be really interesting to see where it goes, and really interesting to see what people do with it. Like I say, it's something that we've been wanting forever, and it's really cool to see it come. I don't think it really matters the technology choices that mean it got here, if that makes sense. It's happening out of the Azure team, it's happening through the Azure Communication Services team. It's not really happening through the Teams team, but I think that's okay. I don't think it really matters, like under the hood. The actual org chart inside Microsoft, I don't particularly care about as a developer. I will use the tools that get the job done, and I think that's how we should all be thinking about it. So yeah, this is really cool, and definitely looking forward to using this. I'm going to be doing a video on exactly how this works, because there's some technicals you need to do to jump through the identity. You need to sort of take the identity of the Teams user and use it and exchange it for a different identity and stuff like that to get it to work. So I'm going to do a video all about doing that, because it's a little bit messy. It's not messy, it's just a bit involved. Like there's a couple of auth process steps you have to kind of go through, so that's fine. As kind of to be expected, I suppose. So look out for that in the coming weeks. Going to be doing a video on that. But yeah, I mean, Microsoft really bearing the lead here right at the end of the year, right inside of another announcement. And that's an interesting point as well, like that they haven't made a massive song and dance about this. And I don't think there's any particular reason behind that, other than it's like right at the end of the year and everyone's tired, and everyone just wants to go on holiday. I think probably this will come back when it goes GA. I imagine they're going to make a really big announcement about it. Maybe, I don't know, maybe the big shows, like maybe Build, maybe Ignite, something like that. They might call this out as a really big thing, being able to embed Teams inside other applications. But you heard it here first, because you are watching or listening to these weekly updates, and that's the whole point of these updates, to bring you this stuff as soon as it happens, so that you are prepared and you know what is going on. talking of Landis, as we were, there is another blog post from Matt Landis that I do want to call out because I thought it was really interesting, and that concerns being able to build like your own Microsoft Teams pager, which is kind of a cool idea. And definitely something I've heard people ask about and ask whether it's a kind of possibility, this idea of being able to kind of have pager-like functionality in Teams. And it's always a bit messy because, yes, you can you've got the important announcement stuff, you've got tagging and all the rest of it, but it requires you to have your mobile with you, to remember it's there, to not ignore the notifications all the time. And every single user, because of how phones work, every single user has their own different combination of notification settings and stuff, and that's not what you want. These type of scenarios where pages are needed, it's really important that people get the message as it's needed when it's needed. So I thought this was a really interesting blog post about how to build your own one of those, how to build your own version of this using Teams, but also the way this works and what makes this interesting is there's a specific device that lends itself quite well to doing this, which is this. It's a Unihertz ASM, which is a tiny device, but it's like a full-on Android 9 device. It runs Android, it runs Teams completely. It's got a screen. It's kind of pretty tough, pretty rugged, and it seems to have a decent enough battery life to make it work for this scenario. So you can set up Teams with this, with all your notifications and everything, to properly, nicely pay you an alert. You could get 4G running on it as well. So suddenly using Teams, you've got this kind of thing that will notify you. I don't even see that. Let me zoom in a bit. You got this thing that will notify you. And it's not the best experience in the world. Like Matt calls this out here. It's not, no landscape mode. It doesn't kind of look like you'd want it to, but it does give you the message, right? And so if your requirement is to have some kind of pager-like device that runs on Teams, can receive messages, this might be worth checking out, because it's not a what's the word I'm looking for? It's not like an appliance-like solution that's completely wrapped. It is a bit like build it yourself, but it's the closest thing I've seen so far to this experience. So that might be exactly what you're looking for. So go check out Matt's blog post, if so, because it's kind of it's a really interesting device, really interesting form factor. So definitely worth checking out. And also Matt calls out as well, obviously it works well. Where does he call out? He calls out somewhere that it works really well with his with the Landis solution as well. I can't find where it is now, but they have an attendance solution for doing some of this stuff. So where can I find it? I feel like I should want to find it to kind of call out, because it would be shameless of me. Oh, here we go. So let me show you what I'm seeing. Yes, so Landis have an attendant console that allows sending these type of alerts, kind of pager type alerts, with a one-click chat callback reminder, which is interesting. So that would work really well with this kind of solution, or this kind of hardware. You could quickly do this kind of one chat thing, send it off, it would page the person. Yeah, nice. Yeah, I thought it was really cool. So anyway, if that sounds of interest to you, then you know it exists. If not, you can safely ignore it. The only other thing I want to talk about, and I'm only going to talk about it briefly because it doesn't really directly concern Microsoft Teams developers. However, I know lots of you watching and listening are the Microsoft Teams person in your organization. And so if you are that person in your organization who is kind of entirely responsible for Microsoft Teams, then I think you probably will want to know about this, because it's a pretty big deal if you haven't heard about it. So this is really just, I'm not going to go into massive detail. So if you do already know about the emergency calling Android thing, you can kind of tune out. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you probably want to dig into it a little bit. There was a thing with Microsoft Teams and Android devices, which would mean that in certain scenarios, it was not possible to do emergency calling. So like 911, 999, 112 calling. Teams would kind of get in the way if you had the Teams app but you weren't signed into it. Teams would get in the way. It wouldn't use the native kind of calling stuff. Bit of a problem, as you can imagine, if you're trying to make an emergency call. So there are some fixes, there are some updates that you should go and get. It's, there's updates now for both for Teams. Certainly there's updates coming for Android. Both sides are they're not blaming the other, but like Teams are saying it's an Android issue and Google are saying it's a Teams issue, whatever. Anyway, there's a fix out for the Teams one, and there's an update for that already. There is going to be an Android update on January the 4th. That's tomorrow. Gosh. As we record this. January's here already. To kind of address all that. So just be aware that's a thing. If you've got an estate of Android devices and or even one, and this affects you, then you will want to patch it pretty quickly, because it's obviously, you don't want to not be able to make emergency calls, and you don't want to be finding this problem at the very point when you want to make an emergency call. So I'll put a link in the description to the Petri.com article. There's obviously a million articles on the web which talk about this. I quite like the Petri one. It's got all the detail. It hasn't got any too much hyperbole about it. It's got lots and lots of links in it to all the official documentation as well. So it's a good one, I think, for me to link to. So, all right, I think that's everything from me. Plans for this week, probably mostly just survive, and then going into next week, looking to do 1 or 2 videos. I already mentioned about doing the Azure Communication Services using the Teams Identity one. Definitely want to do that. There's some other interesting videos I want to do as well. There's some Microsoft Loop ones I want to do. There's some ones about Viva as well. So I'm going to try and make the next couple of weeks all about doing a couple of videos if I can. All right. I think that's everything from me. Whatever it is you're doing, whether or not you're at work or not yet, have a great one. And I will talk to you again next time.